All right, so welcome to session 5. Maybe I will turn my camera on for just a second, just because none of you have met me. It might be a little bit dark in here, actually. So I'm Rebecca. Let me see. I'll put my video on for a minute here. So I'm Rebecca, and I'm just going to start partway through this and finish off this course with you guys for dementia. So as I mentioned, I have taught this course before. This is my first time doing it online and with Skype, so I might find it a little bit tricky or awkward. I have taught online courses before in biology, but like I mentioned before I started recording, if you're just watching the recording, I'm used to talking to about 5 people in Skype, and then everyone else watches my recording. So I'm just going to turn my camera off. It just makes the recording huge. So let's see. So this session 5, so you guys just finished. The last one was a supportive care part 2, and that one is kind of like a huge section. So it had a lot of different information in it, a lot of really kind of like everything from eating to falls you kind of reviewed last time. So this session is a little bit cooler. It doesn't cover as many different topics, so it shouldn't take us as long as some of the others. Did the recording stop? Let me check. It says it's still recording. Did it tell you it stopped? It does say it's still recording, so hopefully it is, Eunice. Great. It is very bad when things stop recording for those of you that watch it later. Okay, so as I was saying, this session is supporting other partners. That's okay, Eunice, don't worry. I was concerned, so please tell me if you think the recording has stopped. So supporting other partners in care. So this one won't be as heavy as the last one, and it shouldn't take quite as long to get through it. Okay, and maybe you guys can go outside and enjoy some sunshine this afternoon. I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so overview of what we're going to kind of be looking at in this, and if you're following along in your book, we are on session 5 and page 3. So kind of the overview is how do we engage and work with care partners, and we'll talk about what exactly a care partner means. So when it comes to care planning and providing support for people that have dementia. So we'll look at some effective communication strategies when working with family and friend care partners, and how do we support families in their efforts to enhance quality of life for a family member living with dementia, because really that's what it's all about. It's about quality of life. There is a slideshow. Can everyone see it? Haley, if you can't see it, potentially we need to log out and log back in. It is there, so I noticed on some of the other sessions some folks were having issues seeing a slideshow as well. So looks like most people can see it, but a few cannot. So it is there, so hopefully if you try coming back in, maybe you'll be able to see it. Or sometimes if your internet's a little bit choppy, it can take a little while to show up too. I noticed that when I've had some poorer internet connections. Okay, so kind of the key concept to this session is family and friends are important care partners who experience a range of emotions throughout the journey. So arguably, family and friends are going to be the most important person in the lives of people that have dementia. So they are going to be an important piece for you guys to think about as nurses for sure. Okay, so let's go to 5.4. So there's a quote here in this book, so I can read it to you, and then we will kind of discuss a question or two. So this is a quote by a family member whose partner was received a diagnosis of dementia. So I wasn't ready to accept it, but I knew it was true. And I had a good cry. The first decisions were how to cope. We talked about everything from the first day. You have to discuss it and work at it. I found that reading helped, so I would know what to expect. Everything that I've read, Bob has read, and we have shared it with our family. We started from right there to get everything in order, enduring power of attorney and everything. I would recommend the same to others. Yeah, if you can't see the slides, it's probably not a huge deal. If you really want, I could post the slides even, but probably you're going to see them in the recording. So if you wanted to like flip through the recording to see the slides, you're probably going to be able to see them there, even if it's not working for you right now. And I'm pretty much going to say everything on the slide plus more. There's not a whole lot of information on them. Okay, so that quote I just read, and you can also like kind of look at it in your book there too. So if you received a diagnosis of dementia today, or some other kind of progressive illness, who would you share this information with and why? So you can write over on the side if you like. It's probably easier to write than to use your mic, but oh, maybe iPad is the issue. So Eunice, you would tell your husband and your family. So family can be, and we'll discuss this, it can be a big definition. So a lot of people may say family, and that will mean different things to different people for sure. Your kids, boyfriend, significant other, your family because they're your support system, spouse, sister, parents, yep, all of those people. So why would you choose those people specifically? So nobody said work. So what if you were still working? Would that be somebody you would share that diagnosis with initially? No? And some people do get a diagnosis of dementia when they're still working. If it's affecting you cognitively, that's true. Oddly enough, I have helped care for or been a care partner to a lot of nurses with dementia. I sometimes joke that it's all the pills we crush and probably inhale, but yeah, I don't know if we're just more aware of it when we are caring for another nurse, but there seems to be a lot of nurses that I've looked after with it. And a lot of them have started their symptoms when they are still working. You would probably share with your employer, yep. If it started to become an issue at work, yes. So a lot of times that would become an issue. So kind of another question to might think about if you did get that diagnosis today of dementia, so who in your life would be affected? So it might be different for everybody. If you have kids, I'm sure your kids would be, nurses don't get enough sleep. Well, so not enough sleep is not something that's research has shown to cause like Alzheimer's or different dementias, but you never know. It could be a compounding factor. So your kids would definitely be affected, especially if you have young children. And I've looked after some people with early onset dementia that still have kids in like junior high and high school. So it can definitely affect your children if they're young or if they're grown-ups too. Your husband. Yeah, so we'll talk about how it can affect spouses. How early, so early dementia. So I've heard of cases of early onset dementia starting late 30s. I've not cared for somebody that early, but I have cared for people in their 50s. Yeah. Or that were diagnosed in their 50s, but I have heard very early. That's not very common, but it has happened. Yeah, there's actually a documentary about a woman in her 30s deciding to have a baby when she'd had a diagnosis, or she was already pregnant, I forget. I don't remember the name of that. I should look it up, but it was kind of in the story. It was in the news a lot actually a few years ago. Anyway, so let's move along from the warm-up. So 5-5. So I look at family life and care partners. So kind of some terms we'll look at here. So in this course, we tend to use the term care partner as meaning people outside of the professional field that are caring for people with dementia. So it's family or friend roles. And the term family, it can be used to describe a ton of different relationships, and it's sort of dependent on the person. So legally, so there are legal aspects to that, in that a substitute decision maker has to have certain documents signed. Often they are notarized. And so legally, through the healthcare system, not everybody is going to be allowed to, have the same amount of input or involvement in care of someone with dementia. So there is that legal aspect to it. But as far as, care planning and being part of a healthcare professional that's providing support, if you're going into someone's home or caring for someone in hospital, pretty much who that person is identifying as their family and friends, we should try to respect that as much as possible. Okay, so the other term, so care provider, is more like the professional frontline worker. So that would be like you guys as nurses, CCAs, medical physicians, so RNs, LPNs, those people are care provider versus care partner, which is a family and friends role. So often people with dementia, and you see this in long-term care, they may not have family, so their decision or support people could be friends. So you do see that quite often. And every now and then you'll have someone that really doesn't have either. So their care partners are kind of absent, and they could be like a part of public trustee. So government is really kind of involved in their care. And you do see those people more so in long-term care, of course. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so just another little point from that previous slide. It's just understanding there are different concepts of family and trying to respect as much as we can whoever the person with dementia is defining as their family. So that's important, not even with people with dementia, but anybody that you're caring for, really. Everybody's really quiet in chat now. You can still hear me, right? Okay, let's see. Okay, 5-7. Thank you. You guys are so chatty and talky, and then nothing. It just made me worry for a second. Let's see. Is there anything? Another term actually you may hear used is carer. So I don't hear this a lot in Canada, but it is one that's used a lot in like the UK and Australia and New Zealand, so carer. And you'll also hear caregiver. So Alzheimer's Society of Canada uses that term caregiver rather than care partner. This program uses care partner more because it's kind of like a more person-centered term. So being a partner rather than somebody that's just providing for somebody. Okay. An interesting point too is that people living with dementia, so they're often cared for by a spouse, sometimes an adult child, but the majority are female. So I've definitely worked with people that provide care that are men, so their male partner, but majority are going to be female. Okay, so we'll talk more about them in a minute. Okay, so this activity, so it's just kind of you're supposed to close your eyes. I'm not going to know if you close your eyes, but I'm going to read a passage here. And once I'm done reading, just think for a minute, and we're going to come up with one word or phrase to describe how you're feeling about this passage, okay? So I'm going to pretend that everyone is closing their eyes, even though they might not be. And I'll read this. So think of a person you love the most, or it could be just someone you're responsible for, regardless of if you love them or not. But it could be your partner, parent, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, or significant other. So picture this person, their face, their smile, maybe what they're wearing, their hair. So think of something you and this person recently did that was either special, meaningful, or fun. So now, keeping your eyes closed, imagine that that person has just received a diagnosis of dementia. So perhaps the past couple of years have been difficult, and there have been several visits to the physician, and all of the tests point to dementia. You know that dementia is an irreversible disease of the brain, but you really don't know anything more about its progression or what to expect in the future. So if you feel like it, you can share what would be one word or phrase to describe how you would be feeling in that moment. Scared, upset, devastated, fearful, heartbroken, sad, disbelief, lost, terrified, lots of sad, scared and sad, upset, heartbroken. Yeah. So some people, there could even be like a conflicting set of emotions there. So if things have been going on for a couple of years and now you have a diagnosis, some people could find relief in that too, in knowing exactly what it is and that they can plan for the future now that they know. You don't think it would be a surprise based on your knowledge and maybe, and the fact that it's been ongoing for a couple of years. So it may not be a surprise. You're right. Lost and lonely, that's another term there. So something to think about. So let's imagine it's now 5 to 10 years later. So you had that diagnosis. It's now 5 to 10 years later, and you've been caring for the person in your own home. Although caregiving can provide a sense of joy and satisfaction, it can be stressful as well. Tell me about some of the things that have been happening during the course of the illness. So you don't really have to tell me that, but over 5 to 10 years after getting a diagnosis of dementia, lots of things could have happened. So it progresses differently for different people, but 10 years down the road, there could be, that person may be wandering at night. They may not be recognizing familiar faces. They would definitely be forgetting more things. Short-term memory would certainly be a problem at this point. So there could be some incontinence happening. There could be mobility issues and falls happening. So all of those things could be now part of your life 5 to 10 years later. And some things to think about. So how do you think caring for somebody at home would affect you working, especially 10 years after a diagnosis? So finances can be a huge thing for families. So do you think you'd be able to work full time? No, you couldn't always be there for them to monitor them. No, that's right. It would make it very difficult to work. Yep. You could be forced into early retirement, definitely. Lots of people, that happens to them. Not without help from others, so that's a very good point. So some people may be able to continue working, but they're definitely going to need support from other people, for sure. Find it difficult to be productive at work, definitely. You would always be thinking about the person at home. Bring in VON, yeah, that can definitely be an option for some people. You wouldn't be able to, I'd have to kids to raise as well. Yeah, definitely, especially if it's a parent. So this comes up a little bit later in the session, but we can address it right now. If you are looking after a parent that has dementia and you also have young children, you are known as the sandwich generation. So you are that person in between that is now in charge of caring for two different generations of people on either side of you. And I can imagine, so I've not been in that situation personally, but just I have 4 children of my own, and I'm thankful every day that my parents are generally pretty healthy right now, because I'm sure that will change someday, and that has got to be very difficult. I'm sure some of you have probably experienced that, I would imagine. Okay, let's go on here. So 5.9. So the impact of dementia on care partners. So your grandfather had Alzheimer's, yeah. Did one of your parents help care for him? No, it's not easy for sure. You all tried, yeah. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. This next section is so the impact of dementia on people that are caring for those. So the care partners, really. So some key points here on the slide that it talks about is quality of life for the care partner linked to the person with dementia. So what that means is the care partner, the person providing a care home or providing care at home, if their quality of life is really poor and really affected and they're stressed and worried to the max, if they're overwhelmed, then that is going to be linked to the quality of life to the person with dementia. So it's similar to if you're a parent with children and you are stressed to the max, sometimes your kids are not having a good day either. So it's going to go the same way with caring for someone who has dementia. So as a care provider and for care partners, you have to kind of think of strategies that are going to enhance quality of life for both. So you can make strategies as much as you want for the person with dementia, and you learned about some of those strategies in your previous sections. Strategies for improving their quality of life with even little things like eating or brushing their teeth, right? But as far as care planning goes, if you have care partners involved, making sure they are looking after themselves and they are being cared for and they are experiencing quality of life is going to be just as important for the patient or the person that's experiencing dementia. So they're kind of going to go hand in hand for sure. And sometimes as nurses, we can overlook that and forget that by just looking at our patient and not considering how much, the health of their family members is going to affect them, especially when they're still at home. So once they're in a long-term care facility, care partners are still very important, but they have some of the relief taken from them in that 24-hour care aspect. But when they're still at home, they're going to be just as important in your care planning, for sure. So one of the most profound changes in when a family experiences one of their members getting dementia can be kind of a shift in roles and responsibilities. So if let's say one spouse who always fixed the car, mowed the lawn, did general repairs to the house, and always ran for groceries, that was always their role for, say, 40 years of marriage. Now suddenly that person has dementia, and as it progresses, they're not able to do all those things. So now there's a role shift for the partner that's providing care, in that they're going to have to somehow figure out how to take on those roles. And it also becomes, it can feel like it's becoming less of like a partnership, and it's becoming more of providing care for somebody. So that's a huge role shift when you're married to somebody, especially, or if you're an adult child with a parent, suddenly there's that reversal of who's caring for who. So that can be one of the most profound changes for people. Let's see. And then there's that mention of the sandwich generation, which we already talked about. Okay, so a spouse or partner, let me just see if I think we're continuing on 5.9 here. I'll just change the slide. So a spouse or partner can have like a profound loss of companionship and can become very lonely. So the person that you've shared your life with all of this time is suddenly kind of not the same. Oh, sorry, I kind of missed your chat over here. Didn't think of that. My husband does most of that stuff. I don't even know how to turn on the lawnmower. Very good point. And I'm sure there are things that you do that he would have no clue about either, right? So even if some of the things he would have to take on if you weren't able to anymore, it goes both ways. And there's so many little things we don't even think of until our partner is not there to do them. So experiencing loneliness is a big thing. Just little things like not being able to have those kind of regular daily conversations with another person on a day-to-day basis, because as dementia progresses, they're not as able to have those little conversations that make the same amount of sense. Something that nurses or caregiver or care providers can be judgmental about is sometimes a partner of somebody with dementia can take on other partners or lovers at the same time, and people can feel conflicting emotions about that. For us as nurses, unless we are in that person's exact shoes, we have to kind of avoid that judgment. I've seen it happen, and it's really not, it's not helpful. I mean, people cope with things how they need to, and for some people that profound loneliness is a real problem. And so by finding another lover or partner, they are improving their own quality of life and therefore able to provide quality of life for their loved one that has dementia too. So it's something to keep in mind that can happen. And try not to feel shocked when it comes up. Something else that can happen to people that are care partners, so they can become so involved in care that they start to let go of their outside ties. So they can start to lose friends they've hung out with. They can stop going to activities they once did, like bingo, or you might not go hunting anymore because it's going to be out of the house and away from the person you're caring for a certain amount of time. So you can lose a lot of that outside support and hobbies in your life. It can also create big changes in life plans. So there can be financial strain, which we talked about. You can be forced into early retirement. Retirement plans could be altered. You may have discussed traveling once you're retired, but especially as dementia progresses, traveling can become more and more difficult. A family I have worked with just recently, actually, her partner has been diagnosed for going on a decade, and they've been able to go down south for 6 months of the year, every one of those years, and this is the first year she's not taking him because last year he ended up having a fall, and they went through the medical system there that cost them thousands and thousands of dollars. So it can definitely alter your plans going forward in life. Another big thing for people that are especially private, suddenly when you have someone with dementia in your family, your life is kind of becoming public, especially as you're involving other healthcare providers and having other people in your home. There are people that are essentially strangers now coming in, and you may be worried about judgment or how your house looks or if it's clean or not clean, or people giving opinions on how you should or shouldn't do things or what to cook or what not to cook. So it can be a big life-altering thing, especially for people that live very privately. So that is definitely something to keep in mind when you are going into other people's homes, to be super respectful of their process and really have good active listening skills and how they feel that things are best done, and then have a conversation, right? Emotional response. So you guys gave a lot of what those kind of first responses could be. So a sense of shock, denial, fear. Some people could be angry. It can feel really unfair to have something like this placed in your life. Guilt can be a common response. So they may feel guilty about maybe they've been noticing some symptoms of dementia in their person, and they may be feeling guilty about how they reacted to that. So they may have been thinking they were doing things for attention, or just being silly or thoughtless in their actions. And then once they have to actually have that diagnosis and know that it's a progressive brain disease, there can be a lot of guilt that happens there. Embarrassment is common but not talked about a lot. So people with dementia can have some behaviors in public, or there can be incontinence and things that family members can feel embarrassed about, because this person is an adult and they're their partner, and society expects them to behave or act in certain ways, right? Grief, because it is a loss for sure. And then finally, there's what you hope is that there's an acceptance. So most families get there eventually, and there's kind of an acceptance of that changing role. All right. So I'm almost lying. We're almost up to 40 minutes, and I told you guys it wouldn't be as long as last time. So let me work a little harder here. So next is kind of the different stages of caring at home. So we've already touched on this some, different stages of care, sorry. So the first stage of care is almost always caring at home. Those early stages of dementia, people are still living sometimes by themselves, sometimes with their partner, sometimes with their kids. So they're still at home generally. But even in the early stages, care partners can become exhausted. I know, especially if some of you have worked in healthcare, even going for an 8 or 12-hour shift and caring for people that have illnesses or dementia, you go home and your feet can hurt. You may have put in 15,000 steps that day. So for someone that has someone at home, that's a 24/7 job, and you have an emotional attachment to that person, and that you only want the absolute best for them generally, right? So it can be physically and emotionally exhausting. Often people that are caring for others at home, they can also be elderly, or also be have a lot of their own health issues that need attention. A lot of spouses will go to extreme lengths to keep their partner at home. They really will kind of go by the, for better or worse thing. And there's no judgment in that, but it can be very exhausting. I have seen some people come in for respite care, which means that they're only there for a short period of time to stay at a long-term care facility, and then they go back home again. And those people can be completely in total care. They might not be walking anymore. They could be incontinent of bowel and bladder. They need to be fed. They need to have their pills crushed. They need a modified diet that is pureed. So they can be complete and total care, but still being cared for at home often it's their spouse. And sometimes partners make that agreement early on in their marriage, saying, if this were to happen to you, I won't put you in long-term care facility. So these are some things that can come up. And that it definitely works for some people, and then it doesn't work for others. And so long-term care becomes a necessity for some families, for sure, especially in our society. If you go to if some of you, I don't know if any of you are from areas like the Philippines or India, but long-term care facilities are actually not very popular there. Almost always people are cared for at home. So it is kind of a bit of a cultural thing too. But here in our culture, or in Canadian type culture, there's actually not as much community support often for people here. So there's not as much family support, there's not as much community to help keep people at home. Often we're a little more isolated here in Canada. So that's why long-term care becomes often an only option for families. But if you have an opportunity to talk to people that are from some other countries, long-term care facilities sometimes don't even exist there or barely exist. So one thing to keep in mind if you're going into someone's home, so being overstressed and exhausted, you can become the sounding board for that. So always try to be empathetic and compassionate towards people, and remember that they're under a lot of stress, and sometimes you are the person that they might take it out on. So they can, sometimes be very negative, and they will often be the people that other nurses that you talk to or other CCAs will say that they're really confrontational and they're really terrible to deal with. So try to go into those situations with an open mind, and often those people just need a little extra support. Yeah, it's not personal, that's right. It's not personal. They just want the best for their people, and they're under a lot of stress. It's very, very true. Okay. So there are a couple of situations here that we'll just look at. We'll do the first one, and we may not do the second one, but let's see. Okay, so 512 is where we're at. There's a scenario, and it's Marie Fougere, and so I can read it, and then we will discuss a couple questions about it. So Marie Fougere is a 78-year-old woman who was diagnosed with dementia in the past year and was still living at home with her husband Don, who is 82. Marie began receiving home care services to assist with personal care 6 months ago. Marie and Dawn's children, Maud and Scott, came home during their summer vacation from Calgary. Neither Maud or Scott were prepared for the changes in their mother. Dawn had not wanted to worry his daughter and son, as they had children and their own lives out west. In addition, Marie had been very adept at covering her symptoms whenever she spoke with her children by phone. So when they witnessed Marie referring to friends who were dead as if they were still alive, repeating questions she had already asked, getting confused about directions, and forgetting how to make meals she had made for years, they were confused and alarmed. In addition, while they were home, Marie left the house several times in the middle of the night and was missing for hours. The police were called on each occasion and brought Marie back home. Home care staff who visited the family during the time when Maud and Scott were home often found the family in disarray and very emotional. Maud and Scott were trying to convince Dawn to consider moving Marie to long-term care. However, Dawn refused to discuss the situation with his children. So, what do you think's happening here? So one question is, what might you be able to do to assist the family care partners in that situation? So as caregivers, what can we do to kind of help the situation? Any thoughts? It's tricky. These situations are definitely not easy going into, and it can be hard to know what to do. Have a family meeting. I think that is a great idea with the care team. Awesome. Maud and Scott are in emotional disarray. Yes, they are. And Dawn, a sense of denial and shock. Maybe he is. Have a conversation with Dawn. Educate the kids on the illness. That's good. In the situation, keeping the kids out of the loop has caused them more stress. Yeah, definitely during their visit has caused them more stress. Yep. Weigh pros and cons. Help them weigh the pros and cons of a care facility. I think that's good. I think that is a good idea to help weigh the pros and cons because she's leaving the house at night a lot, which is a safety thing, right? Dawn seems to be in denial. Could be. Agree with the family meeting as well as a conversation. Good. Yeah, family meeting. I think a family meeting is a great idea. I tend to think that, so people with dementia often are relying on routine. So having her children at home is definitely going to be disrupting that routine, isn't it? And the children, Maud and Scott, are also upset. So they're going to bring that energy into the space. They're upset about their mother's condition, and she is definitely going to sense that. So it could be that, so the home care workers, they're even noticing a change while their kids are at home. So it could be that a lot of this kind of disruption that's happening right now in this scenario could be just a direct result of the kids visiting. And once they're gone, they could get back into their routine, and it might be much more manageable at that point. Okay, have a good day at work. Refer them to a community nurse, to a specialist, like maybe a geriatric specialist, do you think? Every time I read this scenario, I just have a feeling that maybe Dawn is doing a just fine job. If the police were there a lot before this time, it could be something that adult protection was already involved in by this point. She may have already been in a long-term care facility because of that. I just get a feeling that kind of this situation is because the kids are visiting. And they're upset, and they're kind of, it can definitely cause more issues to happen. So family meeting would be a great idea. Good job. Community nurse, yep. Basic changes in their home routine, yeah. A door alarm would be a good idea. Someone mentioned door alarm further up. Yeah, they may have spoke about long-term care facilities in the past, you're right. So it could have been an agreement between the two of them that she would stay at home. It sounds like Don has some supports. He has home care coming in, and it doesn't sound like they were that concerned before this visit either, does it? Okay, so the next kind of stage of care is that decision to move to long-term care. So this happens when a point is reached where they feel like more help is needed than can be provided at home or even with home support. So sometimes there becomes a point where it's just completely overwhelming, or it may be getting to the point that it's overwhelming, and they may decide to move their person to long-term care. So there's lots of worries that are involved with this. They may be feeling like they're betraying them, like they've broken, that a commitment that they made. There could be guilt, feelings of loss and grief. There also could be a lot of worry that, so what power does adult protection have to make decisions for patients and clients? Can they overrule spouse? So actually, yes, if adult protection is involved in a case, they can decide that that a person requires, based on safety often, requires more protection than is being provided. And I have seen people placed in long-term care facilities by adult protection. It's usually like an emergency placement. Yeah. Okay, so they can definitely worry about the care provided in a facility. So that is a big one. So some families, they can kind of bring their person in and they just are more trusting in that they're going to be cared for. A lot of care partners, it's a really difficult transition to give up that care. So it can be really rough for them. So on the flip side of that though, there can also be a huge sense of relief. So I had a daughter actually tell me recently that she is now getting the first full nights of sleep that she's had in like 15 years. So there can be a sense of relief. There can be this ability to kind of let go of some stress and really just rest more. They can maybe even feel joy because they're getting some of their life back outside of being a care partner. Let's see here. So there are lots of things that you can do to make that transition easier. That first day, those first moments in meeting somebody, making them feel comfortable, being in like a quiet space. Always have someone there to greet them at the door, help them settle into a room, make them family able to personalize the room, putting like pictures or memory books or things in the room, maybe favorite items. maybe some family members can feel awkward in a facility, so giving them things to do, saying, hey, we have a TV room here if you'd like to use it. We have puzzles. Would you like to read this book? Maybe suggesting that you look at photo albums. Those kind of things can help. Encourage family and friends to visit often, but also making sure they're aware that when someone first moves into long-term care, there can be a transition period where you could see some symptoms worsen because their routine is disrupted and because they're in unfamiliar situations. So there can be that transition period. So making sure they know about that is important. Yeah, you said personalization is important. Definitely, it is important. And with photos, even having photos labeled is even a great idea so that they can say, oh yes, that's Sarah in that picture, because it says Sarah right there. When I was in dietary, I offered beverages to the family resident. That's awesome. I like that. That's a great idea, making them feel more comfortable. I love the idea. So you said you were in dietary and offering beverages. I love when facilities can welcome families into sharing meals or snacks with their family member, because that's a big thing at home. You share meals and snacks together, so it's a nice thing to happen in a facility too. Okay, so on 516, there's another scenario there. So it's really about somebody that's going to have difficulty communicating in a long-term care facility because they've kind of reverted to only speaking Arabic. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but there are some considerations when it comes to communication. So you're going to have to find some. If someone is not speaking English, even though they may have at one point, sometimes dementia can take away that ability. So figuring out ways to communicate. So whether having a translator, maybe a staff person that can help. We can use picture boards for them to help show us what they need. I once saw a family put up a sign that had a few key words in Mandarin, and so they spelled it out phonetically. So we English people could say the word, and so one word would mean like bathroom and one word would mean drink. So just having those few little words can actually make a huge difference with that person. So I'm not going to read that scenario to you, but it is about that communication piece. So kind of the final notes here with supporting partners in care. So encouraging that quality of life with the care partner is important. So making sure they're getting good rest, eating nourishing meals. So making it clear that if they're not looking after themselves, that's going to affect the life of the person with them. And making it clear by just being supportive, not just telling them what to do, but like bringing them or making a meal and making enough for them to eat too, or providing care in a way that that person can take a little break and go read a book somewhere, or whatever it is that you can help them get some self-care in. Good communication is essential, so I'm sure you've talked about that communication to death in your nursing courses, but it's communication that should flow back and forth easily. Sometimes these families that are labeled as being difficult to work with or really angry all the time, really all they want is more communication. If something, even a little thing happens with their person, if you just gave them a quick call that could take a few minutes, that could be one thing that just makes them feel so much better about them being in your care. Just a quick call. They just want to know, they just want to communicate and know what's happening with their person. Keep them informed, definitely. So always think about that when someone says, oh, that family is terrible to deal with. Like, oh my God, I don't want to call them. I don't want to tell them about these med changes. I don't want to do this. Sometimes those people, if you are just friendly and you call them with every little piece of information that you should and do it in a timely manner, they're going to be wonderful. You're going to become their favorite nurse probably. So the video that I posted, or that was posted to watch, if you haven't already, they prefer honesty for sure. If you haven't watched that video already, please go and do so and post in the discussion. It is a really eye-opening video. It makes me, every time I've watched it, it's kind of emotional, especially if you've worked with or had a family member with dementia. It's like, yeah, it's really eye-opening in how someone with dementia can see things. It hit you right in the heart. Yes, me too. Every time I watch it, and I've watched it quite a few times. Yeah, the video was amazing. It made you cry. Yeah. Yeah. I usually watch it in a classroom full of people, and there's lots of tears and sniffles happening, so you're not alone. So just a reminder about your mission statement, which is due, I think, the 28th. Someone could fix me on that if it's not the 28th, but just think about anything from this session that might go into your mission statement. 29th is it? Thank you. So there could be something that you've picked up from this session or the video that you'd like to add to your mission statement. And also your final project proposal is due, I believe, this within the next week. I think, is it Sunday? The 13th maybe? Is that what I think it's the 13th. Is it the 15th? Oh God, I'm just off all over the place. The 15th. You guys know when it's due. Just look on Brightspace. I looked right before the session too, but for some reason my brain is off today. Not enough coffee maybe. Okay. And your reflective exercise. You thought it was the 13th too. Isn't that interesting? Okay, I'm going to stop recording, and you guys can still ask any questions if you want. I'll hang out for a bit.